exciting. Here it is. This is Dom chatting to the absolutely brilliant Rufus Sewell and Keeley Hawes.
Hello. Dom. Very nice to meet you.
Hi, how are you doing?
Pleasure. Hello. So welcome to the Filmmakers podcast. We are indeed a filmmaking podcast. So hopefully we can go into.
So it's apt then, what you called.
Exactly. Yeah.
I see how that works. Yeah.
So how are you both doing? How's the
Great.
vibe at the moment?
So far, the vibe is okay. One doesn't want to jump the gun, but it's not been an unpleasant day so far.
No,
Excellent.
as far as these things go.
As far as these things go, with that qualification.
Yeah, the junket, because it's mayhem, isn't it? Sort of going through the junket process and the release of the film, but there's also a very exciting time because you've been working on it for such a long time and you get to sort of put it out to the world.
Yeah, and if you did get on and it is something that you're proud of, it does make it a little easier. But the thing is, even telling the truth feels like a lie after a while.
Yes, it does. Especially when you've repeated yourself 32 times and you try to make it interesting for each person that you meet and yourself.
We haven't done that many. We haven't done that many.
I'd like to hope that my questions would be slightly different. From
we've had some great questions and it's really nice to get to this point.
All of them up till now have been amazing.
It's great to get to this point, to get a reaction to the film because, you spent a lot of time with it and the anticipation of, and hoping people will like it.
So let's get into how you both boarded the project. Like, how did you first hear about it? I mean, it's obviously a very controversial story. So that must have been an interesting sort of call coming through to both your agents, I'm guessing. Was it sort of through Netflix, casting director? How did that first part happen?
Well, I don't know what happened, to lead up to my getting the email or call from my agent, but it was quite exciting, because, as you say, for all of those reasons, it's like, ooh, blimey, and before I'd even read it, just the Prince Andrew, whatever, and your brain shoots off in 1,000 different directions. Just, this is, and then you open the script. But I was already thinking, you know what, this feels like, it's nice to be offered something that makes you feel like you're being asked to be an actor,
Yeah.
Which is always what I want. But sometimes you have to sort through the things that, you think, God, do they think I'm a type? Is that, which can be frustrating. And sometimes even within that type, there's fantastic stuff to do. But this felt like the kind of thing I used to do when I was younger, and then after a little bit of thinking, I said yes. And then afterwards started panicking, but I had lots of time.
And what about yourself, Keeley?
Pretty much the same, in as much as you get a call from your agent saying I'm going to send over a script, and you have a vague idea of what it would be like, what it might be like, what it's about, but actually it was a very pleasant surprise in that we're viewing it through the eyes of these incredible women who worked so hard, rather than of course it's the story of the interview with Prince Andrew, but actually
it's much more.
It's about much more than that. So don't tell Rufus that.
Whoops.
It's about me.
Sorry, I forgot you were there.
I didn't read those bits, but spoils it for the premiere.
I was delighted, and I knew nothing about Amanda Thirsk. I think most people don't, so that was quite an eye opener. And there's so much in there that we don't know. You get offered something like this and think, well, that's the story that we all know. We all have an awareness of the interview. I mean, I think probably everyone. It was one of those moments in time you couldn't get away from it. It was a pleasant surprise. Tonally, it's much more of a thriller than I anticipated.
Yes.
It really gets your heart going, even though that they get the interview, of course they do. There are elements all the way through where you're watching and thinking, or reading the script and thinking, are they going to do it? So it's got a lot to offer that we don't know about.
Who was attached at that point? Was it, okay, it's Netflix who commissioned it, the director Philip's on board? I mean, how much was in place at the point when you both sort of signed on? Because it's interesting to know like what goes through your process when you're deciding to board a project for, when filmmakers are sort of trying to get scripts to you and that kind of thing.
I think Billy was on board.
Yeah. Mm-hmm.
I can't remember actually.
Keeley was on board.
Was I on board?
Because
there we go.
I'm a fan of hers.
Oh, okay. Yeah.
I thought, and I think Billy and Keeley, and I just remember thinking, it's a good cast.
Yeah.
And it did. And Philip, who, from The Crown, it's just like, okay, so the pedigree is quite good,
Yeah.
Lots of pieces in place.
Yeah, and you can never know for sure what something will be. Often you get offered something and you just think, God, I wish I could watch it and see if I'm any good in this.
Well, you both did very well, right? So I mean, what is the process in trying to? I mean, one of the things I found really interesting when I used to sort of go and observe actors to try and learn how to be a better director and that kind of thing. And one of the most interesting things I learned was that actors, generally have to agree with their character's choices, no matter how abominable the character. So how do you sort of look at someone like Prince Andrew, and you're sort of playing the aide, of course? How do you look at those characters and find relatable humanisms that you can kind of play whilst and not villainizing them and sort of creating something that portrays what the script is trying to do?
I think that's probably.
I mean, as far as I'm concerned, what I like to do is kind of become a habit of mine now anyway. It's the way I like to look at the world, is even as I was watching the interview and judging him, or at least having judgments about what I think had occurred, I was also trying to, if I use the word empathize, I differentiate that from sympathize, but I'm always interested in what is behind people's behavior, and it's a very useful habit of mine to have in terms of just calibrating your way through human relations. Is yes, they did that. Why would they have done that? What's my contribution to this? Just in general, relationships. But when I watched it, what was fascinating to me about it wasn't just what he was doing, but why.
Yes.
And what he was thinking and what his version of events and his part in that was. That was what brought me in. So it was a process of discovery to try to go further into that when I was doing it.
And I think that's something that this does incredibly well, because you get to see Andrew sort of with the teddy bears on the bed, and you get to sort of see how he was brought up and this sort of this insulation, I guess, from the real world. And I think that's what makes your character so. I mean, your character, Keeley, is very heartbreaking, actually, because it's almost like a mothering sort of type relationship.
It is. It's really sad.
It is really sad.
And the ending of her story their story is really sad and quite moving. But I think in terms of having empathy, I think you're quite right, and I sort of go back to that quite a lot. That actors, and I think it's part of what makes actors, on the whole, I think, in my experience, and I've been very lucky maybe, but, really nice, open, decent people, because they are,
which is kind of boring,
they're less
for people.
judgmental. Yes, it is sort of boring.
Who's an arsehole?
But you have to find out, and they, obviously in every walk of life, they exist. But on the whole, you are forced to empathize in some way with whoever you're playing, and whatever they might have done and their reasons or the background or whatever brought them to that decision. So yeah.
And I suppose for your character, it's, I mean, how do you approach how your character feels about about his role in all of this? Like, I mean, are you hoodwinked yourself? Are you seeing it but sort of trying not to believe it? Like, I mean, because that's a really interesting sort of psychological process for where your character would be with all these things from the BBC and the allegations sort of coming in.
I'm not sure that he thought he was hoodwinking anybody, and I'm almost certain that she didn't ever feel that way. With hindsight, all of that might appear different, but
no.
In the moment, those years ago when all of this was coming about, I think they'd been working together for a long time. They were great friends. She thought very highly of him, and they were very close and trusted each other. She was hugely trusted by him, and she wanted everybody to see him through her eyes, and what a great guy he was. And it was a moment where the expectation, he had to step forward probably and say something. It did reach that point.
And it is a kind of tragic because your character is so entrusting to her, and she really believes she's doing the right thing. I mean, I don't know if they'd left it alone, would it have gone away? Probably not anyway. So I mean,
there's also a sense, you can see it by not so much now, but when people were being put forward to defend him. They often said the same thing, but he was set up, right? And I don't think that's necessarily not true in terms of the MO of the Epstein thing. But that doesn't mean it didn't happen. I'm not going to make a statement about what did and what didn't.
Yeah.
But the belief that you were mistreated as a counterbalance to whatever guilt and culpability you feel, there's a strong sense watching Andrew that he feels a victim of something. And that is very common, that people who may or may not have perpetrated certain things can find the version of it in which they are the victim.
Yeah.
And vice versa, people who have had terrible things done to them are left sometimes with this sense of guilt. And it can be very hypnotic, and people in that circle can very much go along with it. You know?
Yeah, I mean, I suppose this was something we were talking about with Philip earlier, but the idea that someone in that position would just never have anyone really telling them off in life or giving them perspective
or to say,
on these things.
That's bollocks.
Yeah.
It's a bubble.
It's a bubble,
Yeah.
yeah, exactly.
As we know.
I suppose you're part of the bubble in protecting him as well.
Totally. Yeah, I think there's a huge element of that.
Yeah, and the interview, we got to be there the moment that the bubble was burst, in terms of someone no longer, not rudely or not aggressively, but someone suddenly not playing their part in that compact, which was, you believe you're a prince, you believe you're this, therefore so do I.
Yes. Yeah.
That the other person suddenly goes, no, what do you mean? For the first time. And you can see him kind of puckering and gasping for air.
Yeah, crumpling a bit.
You
Yeah,
know?
definitely.
There's an interesting moment, isn't there, when it's social media really that they start to find out through the reaction. It comes through social media, whereas, in days gone by they would have waited until the news the next day or whatever. But it's almost in real time
And
that
the
it
news would
starts
have
to
been able to
trickle
shape
through.
it, rather than the
Totally.
news having to reflect the social
Yeah.
media.
Yeah. And that must have been difficult, because obviously your character's got huge guilt for the way the whole thing's kind of come around, because you, in a way, sort of helped mastermind it.
Yes, but she didn't put the words into his mouth.
That's very true.
He did that.
Very true.
So.
So nice.
Back off.
Yeah.
Back off, mate.
Definitely his fault. Definitely his fault. So, how do you two work in terms of when you? Because I mean, obviously, you do have a really convincing relationship with each other in the film. Did you have time to chat in advance? Did you have phone calls? Did you have like any initial discussions, or was it just doing your own sort of work and then relying on the process?
We sat around a table. We had to read through.
But if you're lucky, you just kind of meet in the middle, don't you?
You meet in the middle. You learn your lines. You listen to what the other person's
always
saying.
helps.
Yeah, and like pretty immediately, I think it just kind of worked.
Yeah.
And if it doesn't, then there's things you might have to do.
Yeah.
But I always, trust what happens naturally.
Yes.
Or is it, let that explore that.
Yeah.
And how do you both work in terms of, obviously with a true story, you're trying to embody a character and you're trying to do them authentically, but there's going to be small quirks or moments in your own psyche, I guess, that sort of come through. Maybe there's little bits that you want to bring in that isn't in the character or in the script. How do you navigate that for this one, for instance, when you've got two very clear-cut people?
I don't consciously want to bring in anything that's not in the character as I see it, or not in the script.
Sure.
But, certain quirks that might be where you and the character meet might be different from those quirks that come up with a different actor playing, because that's why it's interesting watching someone embody someone else.
That's it, yeah.
Because there are certain things that I see in Andrew that other people might not. And that's why someone else playing the part is like, yeah, fine, because it's going to be a different concoction and it's going to different mix to tell you something else. But it's not consciously trying to put in parts of yourself, but bits of them that resonate with you.
And sometimes that's casting. If you cast somebody like Rufus, who is inherently likable, like physiologically likable and funny and kind and all of those things, then and not just you in this
Could you
instance,
write that down?
but
Yeah, likable and funny.
Physiologically.
Heard of the Filmmakers podcast first.
Those things for free in a character, no matter who you're playing.
Yes, that's true, yeah.
There
you're
is,
right.
I think, always an element of that, just in the fact that you are that person as a human.
I agree, yeah.
And you do want to use...
There is always that base layer of who you are as a person that will always come in, no matter how different your character is, for sure. Where were we?
I don't know.
There was some good stuff there.
There was
We've
some
lost
magic.
it.
There was some great
It's
stuff.
gone forever.
Let's talk about
It's like the
the
Library of Alexandria.
let's talk about
Puffy smoke.
let's talk about the rehearsal process.
Yes.
So how do you like to work in that? How do you like to develop and not overdevelop the characters? What sort of happened for this one?
Well, in TV, you rarely get any rehearsal, as you probably know.
Yes.
And in this instance, we got together, we had the read through, and then we were lucky enough to spend some time sitting around a table with Sam, with an advisor from the Palace.
Yeah.
Am I allowed to say that?
Yeah.
Well, I've said it now.
Yeah, you said it. It's on the record.
And so
Talking it through,
and just
really.
talking it through really with everyone.
Which I like, yeah.
Yeah, which was great. And so we didn't delve too deeply into each scene, or so it was always quite fresh on the day.
I'm a big believer in not
doing that.
Right?
Yeah, me too.
The mantra is better to have a bad take than a brilliant rehearsal.
Interesting.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Because if something happens,
Yeah.
you want to
It can
film it.
suck
You don't
the
want something to
life
happen for the
out of-
first time
Yeah.
in a rehearsal.
Yeah.
Because sometimes then you're trying to chase something that happened. Better to if something does happen, let it go and try to find something else.
Yeah.
Because otherwise it becomes an impersonation of something that happened before.
Yeah.
Is that to do with aliveness, I suppose, as well? So it's fresh for you every take?
Well, yeah, it's about something. Yes, of course. It's something you're going to create. If you're rehearsing like with a play, you get to a level of relaxation that is different so that things do become fresher the more rehearsed they are. But with filming on TV, you only have enough rehearsal to make something go stale.
Yeah.
With theatre, you get past that back onto a new kind of freshness. Would you agree with that?
I would totally agree with that. Yeah.
So you've got to be careful. But I think
With
we
the
all
play, the
worked a lot
adrenaline
of-
starts to drop off, but
Yes,
with
that's it.
film, it just rises the more takes you have to do.
Exactly.
So-
You become self-conscious.
Yeah.
And then it can come round again if you get enough
Yes.
takes.
Yeah.
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 Do you have any sort of top tips for people starting off in the industry, how they might, I don't know, advice for either your younger selves or someone else sort of trying to break through as an actor, mindsets, tips, tricks, anything like that?
Tips and tricks.
Oh my
That is a
Could be a
tricky
tip
one.
or a trick.
Uh,
I don't know. Is any moments when you've had like real
Bring a
doubts,
charger.
doubts
Bring
and
a
difficult.
charger.
I think that was a dig at me.
yeah.
I meant a phone charger.
It's easy to say, I suppose, but relax, as much as
God,
you can.
yeah, I used to think that wasn't true because I think, no, because I tense myself up before I go on, but that was only so I could relax when I went on.
Yes.
But I would when I was a
if you could
drama
bottle
student,
being relaxed.
in the end, it's so much about, listening.
Yeah.
In the end, listening with all your senses is a way of relaxing because your concentration will be on the thing you're looking at rather than yourself.
Yeah.
Because it's the thing that gets if I'm not listening, then I start wondering about why is my nose beginning to turn up? What's happening to my ears? You're not in the moment, but
You're
it's
not in
all
the
about
moment,
relaxation. And
Listen to people. It's less about you than you think, more about the other person,
Yeah.
I would say.
Amazing.
Make
Okay.
it about the other person.
Great advice. Great advice. Thank you very much to you both. Really enjoyed the interview.